Hey everyone, I'm your author June. Before we get started, I really would appreciate it if everyone could hit the subscribe button. It helps me grow the channel, and I would love for all of you to come on this journey with me, as a family. Now, let's get into the story. Let me know if you enjoy. He surfaced into consciousness, a gritty taste, and the tang of blood coating his tongue. A relentless throb hammered at his skull, centered somewhere deep behind his eyes. The earth pressed against his frame, an unyielding slab beneath his ribs, restricting each breath. A groan escaped him as he attempted to rise, only to be met with a searing jolt in his left shoulder that slammed him back down. Blinking against the glare, he struggled to bring the world into focus. The sky was a faded wash of blue, the sun a distant, muted orb. He found himself amidst a desolate landscape of stunted shrubs and withered grasses, the air pungent with sage, and a faint metallic odor he couldn't quite place. A cold wave of panic washed over him. He was nowhere. He was no one. He groped for a name, a face, a single thread of memory. But his mind offered only a blank, echoing void, like gazing into an abyss where even screams died silently. His hand, trembling, scraped across the rough stubble of his jaw, the unfamiliar texture of his own skin. He felt adrift, helplessly, terrifyingly adrift. With renewed resolve, he fought to sit up, teeth clenched against the fiery pain. This time, he managed to prop himself on one elbow, though his vision swam precariously. Desperation fueled his gaze as he scanned the horizon, seeking some sign, a recognizable feature, anything to anchor him. But there was only the unyielding panorama of the desert, stretching endlessly. He was utterly alone. The sun, a burning eye in the sky, offered no mercy. Thirst clawed at his throat, and his body felt weaker with each second. He had to find water. He had to find rescue. Summoning a surge of will, he pushed himself to his feet, swaying like a reed in the wind. The world tilted, threatening to throw him off balance, but he steadied himself and took a hesitant step, then another, his legs unsteady beneath him. Driven by pure instinct, he forged ahead. Time dissolved into a meaningless blur, each footfall a monumental victory. The sun's relentless heat intensified, baking the parched earth and blistering his skin. His lips cracked, drawing blood, and his tongue felt like coarse sandpaper, while the pounding in his head escalated into a deafening roar. Then, just as his strength threatened to desert him entirely, he glimpsed it. A splash of emerald against the ochre landscape. A fragile spark of hope ignited within him. He lurched toward it, vision blurring at the edges, his body screaming in protest. As he drew closer, the verdant promise resolved into trees, and the delicate music of running water reached his ears. A stream. His heart leaped with anticipation as he quickened his pace, stumbling forward. He reached the bank and collapsed, burying his face in the cool, clear water. He drank deeply, greedily, allowing the precious liquid to cleanse him of the dust and exhaustion. He lay there for what felt like an eternity, slowly replenishing his depleted reserves. Finally, he sat up and noticed a modest ranch house nestled amongst the trees. A plume of smoke drifted lazily from the chimney, a beacon of habitation, of civilization. Hesitation flickered through him. He knew nothing of the people who lived there. They could be a threat, but he had no other recourse. He needed assistance. His steps were tentative as he approached the dwelling. A woman was tending a small garden as he drew near. Slender and statuesque, she had a cascade of dark hair trailing down her back. Simply dressed, her hands bore the evidence of hard work. She looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. Hello? Her voice, though gentle, held a note of unwavering strength. Can I help you? He tried to speak, but his throat constricted. He could only stand there, wordless, his mind empty. Are you all right? She inquired, taking a step closer. You look like you've been through the ringer. He shook his head, attempting to gather his scattered thoughts. I don't know, he stammered, his voice hoarse. I don't know who I am. I don't remember anything. Her expression softened with compassion. You don't remember your name? Again, he shook his head. Nothing. She studied him intently for a long moment, her gaze laced with concern. Well, she stated finally, you can't stay out here. Come inside. I'll get you some water and something to eat. He followed her into the house, his gaze sweeping the room. Though small, it exuded warmth, with a hearth, a simple table, and a few chairs. The walls were lined with shelves overflowing with books and photographs, and the air carried the comforting scent of wood smoke and lavender. Sit down, she directed, gesturing toward a chair. I'll be right back. He sank into the chair, feeling profoundly out of place. He didn't belong in this heathen. He didn't belong anywhere. He watched as she moved with quiet efficiency around the kitchen, preparing sustenance. Her movements were economical and graceful. He wondered about her, about the story etched into her life. She returned with a steaming bowl of stew and a glass of water. Eat, she urged. You need to recover. He ate slowly, deliberately, savoring each mouthful. The stew was rustic yet satisfying, and he registered the depth of his hunger. As he ate, she sat across from him, observing him with a mixture of curiosity and solicitude. So, she began when he had finished, you truly don't remember anything? He shook his head. Nothing at all. My mind is a complete void. That's awful, she murmured. But don't despair. We'll sort this out. She paused, thoughtful. I found you a few miles from my property line, unconscious. You were hurt. It looks as though you've had a rough go. Injured? He tentatively touched his shoulder, and a jolt of sharp pain ricocheted through him. He winced involuntarily. I cleaned and bandaged it as best I could, she said. Rest is what you need now. Thank you, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Thank you for everything. Don't mention it, she replied. It's the least I could do. My name is Caroline Rivers. I don't have a name, he confessed. Not that I know of. Caroline offered a gentle smile. Then I'll gift you one. For the time being, I'll call you John Doe, until we ascertain who you truly are. He nodded slowly. John, he repeated, testing the name. It feels peculiar, alien, yet somehow right. You can stay here for as long as you need, Caroline offered. I have ample space and time. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting his profound gratitude. A stranger, and yet she had sheltered him, tended to his wounds, extended a lifeline. He couldn't understand her motivation, but he was overwhelmingly grateful. I don't know how to repay you, he admitted. Caroline shrugged. Just get some rest, John. That's all the payment I require. She stood. There's a spare room upstairs. I'll show you. He followed her up the creaking staircase, his body heavy with fatigue. She led him to a small chamber containing a bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the stream. Here you are, she said. Get some sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. He nodded mutely and sat on the edge of the bed. It was soft and inviting, a welcome contrast to the harsh ground. "Good night, John," Caroline said, turning to depart. "The night," he answered, his voice thick with emotion. As the door clicked shut behind her, he lay back on the bed, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. He was John Doe, a man stripped of his past, his memories, his very identity. He was a blank slate, an empty vessel. And for the first time since waking, a nascent sense of hope flickered within him. Perhaps, against all odds, he could begin anew. Perhaps he could evolve into someone deserving of Caroline's generosity, someone worthy of a second chance. He closed his eyes and drifted into the oblivion of sleep, the image of Caroline's compassionate face imprinted on his mind. The future remained a mystery, but one thing was certain. He would dedicate himself to safeguarding the woman who had bestowed upon him a name, a sanctuary, and a reason to exist. A debt of kindness, the ensuing days settled into a predictable pattern. Caroline, an indefatigable nurse, ministered to him with hands as light as feathers, cleansing his injuries and replacing soiled dressings. The bong she smeared possessed a fragrance of lavender intertwined with an earthy note, a bond that permeated his pores and eased the fiery pain. An insatiable hunger consumed him, and thrice daily Caroline thoughtfully placed before him a steaming bowl of stew or a slice of golden cornbread. Strength trickled back with each sunrise, the nagging headache diminishing to a distant echo. Meals transpired in near silence, broken only by the chime of cutlery and the poking embers in the hearth. Caroline recounted tales of redemption, a town grappling with a crippling drought, its families struggling against adversity. He absorbed her narratives, piecing together a world fragmented in his memory. Redemption, the town's moniker, resonated as both sarcastic and promising. One afternoon brought a surge of independence he insisted on aiding with the farm work. Despite initial objections, Caroline conceded when she perceived the resolve blazing in his gaze. Grasping an axe, he began to cleave wood, the familiar arc of the blade a ghostly echo of forgotten actions. As the steel bit into the wood, a violent montage assaulted his mind, a gritty avenue, a contorted visage, the cold gleam of a blade. He recoiled, the axe clattering to the ground, his breath sawing in his chest. Caroline hastened to his side, concern etched into every line of her face. "What is it?" she pressed, her voice thick with anxiety. He shook his head, attempting to banish the lingering vision. I don't know. It felt like a dream, yet tangible." He kneaded his temple, a persistent throb hammering behind his eyes. There was violence, raw anger. Caroline assisted him to a nearby tree stump. Kneeling, her eyes searched his. "It's all right," she murmured, a soothing balm to his distress. "Your mind is simply attempting to order chaos. Don't force it." He peered at her, her face a sanctuary amidst the turmoil within him. "Who was I, Caroline?" he implored, his voice barely audible. "What have I done?" A flicker of sorrow crossed her features. "I don't know, John," she replied softly. "But whatever the past held, it's over. You have the gift of a clean slate." He scrutinized his own hands, weathered and marked, the hands of a man accustomed to hard labor, perhaps even conflict. He struggled to reconcile these hands with the burgeoning peace within him, the profound thankfulness he felt for her presence. Days morphed into weeks. Levi, as Caroline now called him, steadily recovered. He participated in the daily rhythms of the farm, patching fences, feeding the hens, and nurturing the small vegetable patch. The work offered a quiet fulfillment, a sense of purpose he hadn't realized. He craved. One evening, as they observed the sunset bleed across the sky in shades of fiery orange and soft violet from the porch, Caroline spoke, her tone pensive. "You know, Levi," she remarked, "you're a quick study, you learn readily, and possess remarkable strength." "Perhaps," he conceded, a shrug lifting his shoulders. "It's as if fragments remain, even though I can't place them." "What will you do when you're fully well?" she inquired, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. The question hung between them, heavy with unacknowledged worries. He had avoided pondering it, immersing himself in the present, content to exist within the haven of her generosity. Yet, he knew this tranquility could not last. "I don't know," he confessed at length. "I haven't considered it yet." "You can't remain here indefinitely," she countered softly, a hint of regret coloring her voice. "This isn't your life, not truly. You must discover your identity, your place in the world." "But what if I dislike my discovery?" he asked, a subtle thread of fear laced into his voice. "What if I was someone despicable?" Caroline grasped his hand, offering a comforting warmth. "Then you make a conscious choice," she asserted firmly. "You choose a different path. You strive for betterment." He gazed at her, her eyes reflecting an unwavering faith in him. A faith he had yet to embrace himself, yet deeply desired to. "And what of you, Caroline?" he questioned. "What awaits you when I depart?" A fleeting shadow veiled her features, a wisp of pain swiftly concealed. "I will be well," she responded, forcing a smile. "I lived in solitude before your arrival, and solitude will return, but I will always cherish the time we shared." He squeezed her hand, his heart heavy with a blend of gratitude and guilt. He was indebted to her for everything: his life, his recovery, his burgeoning optimism. He could never fully reciprocate her kindness, yet he could endeavor to ease her ball. Burden? To brighten her world while he occupied it. As time unfolded, their bond deepened. They exchanged anecdotes, peals of laughter, and shared quiet moments of connection. He found himself increasingly drawn to her spirit, her resilience, her steadfast empathy. He glimpsed a spark within her eyes that mirrored the burgeoning hope within his own heart. One evening, after supper, Caroline retrieved a time-worn, leather-bound volume. "I thought you might enjoy something to read," she said, offering it to him. "A collection of poetry." He accepted the book, his fingers tracing the faded gilt lettering on the cover. He hadn't experienced verse since he couldn't recall ever reading poetry. Nevertheless, he opened the book and began to vocalize the words, his voice initially wavering, then gaining assurance as he became absorbed in the cadence and eloquence of the language. Caroline listened with rapt attention, her eyes closed, a faint smile gracing her lips. Upon completion, she opened her eyes and regarded him, her expression filled with admiration. "Your voice possesses a rare quality, Levi," she murmured softly. "And you express such emotion in your reading." He felt heat rise in his neck, unaccustomed to such candid praise. He glanced down at the book, suddenly aware of the charged atmosphere. The fire in the hearth crackled merrily, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The air hung thick with the mingled scents of wood smoke and lavender, and a palpable tension filled the space between them. He looked up at her, his heart thrumming in his chest. He longed to reach out and touch her, to experience the warmth of her skin against his. He yearned to express his profound gratitude, to convey her significance in his life, yet hesitated, fearful of overstepping boundaries, of shattering the fragile equilibrium of their relationship. Caroline met his gaze, her eyes mirroring a blend of tenderness and yearning. She reached out and gently caressed his cheek, her fingers soft and warm against his skin. "Thank you, Levi," she whispered, "for everything." He closed his eyes and leaned into her touch, relishing the moment. He could not foresee the future, but in that instant, enveloped by the warmth of her presence, he felt a surge of possibility, a conviction that perhaps, just perhaps, he could attain absolution. He could evolve into the man she believed he could be. Whispers of the past, the sun beat down on Levi's back as he wrestled with the warped fence post. The wood was brittle, cracked by years of relentless sun and neglect, mirroring, in a way, the fragmented state of his own mind. Caroline watched him from the porch, her brow furrowed with concern, but also a quiet admiration. He'd insisted on helping, despite her protests. He wasn't fully healed, she knew, but he possessed a restless energy, a need to contribute, to prove himself useful. "Careful there, Levi," she called out, her voice carrying on the dry wind. "Don't want you reopening those wounds." He grunted in response, straining against the stubborn post. "Needs fixin'," he said, his voice rough, but laced with a newfound gentleness she hadn't heard before he lost his memory. "Can't have your cattle wanderin' off." Caroline smiled softly, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "They're hardy stock. They can handle themselves." He finally managed to dislodge the rotten post, tossing it aside with a sigh. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of dirt across his forehead. He looked at Caroline, a sheepish grin spreading across his face. "Maybe," he conceded, "but it makes me feel useful." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Useful. It was a feeling Levi hadn't known he craved, a sense of purpose that had been buried beneath layers of violence and forgotten sins. Caroline saw it in his eyes, the yearning for something more than just survival, and her heart ached for him. Later that afternoon, Levi found Caroline cleaning her rifle. The weapon was old, a lever-action Winchester, its stock worn smooth by years of use. But it was well maintained, the steel gleaming in the afternoon light. "You know how to use that?" Levi asked, leaning against the doorframe. Caroline glanced up, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Of course I do. This is the West, Levi. Every woman learns to handle a gun." "Show me," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. He didn't know why he wanted to learn, but something deep inside him, a primal instinct, urged him to understand this tool of survival, this instrument of something. Caroline hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right," she said, rising to her feet. "But pay attention, this ain't no toy." She led him out to the edge of the property, where a row of tin cans sat perched on a weathered fence post. She showed him how to hold the rifle, how to sight down the barrel, how to squeeze the trigger, not jerk it. He absorbed her instructions with a focused intensity, his brow furrowed in concentration. His first few shots went wide, kicking up dust several feet from the cans. He adjusted his grip, his stance, his breathing, just as Caroline had instructed. His next shot clipped a can, sending it clattering to the ground. A slow smile spread across his face. "Not bad," Caroline said, her voice tinged with admiration. "For a beginner." He continued to practice, his movements becoming smoother, more fluid. With each shot, something stirred within him, a muscle memory, a faint echo of a past he couldn't quite grasp. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and strangely familiar. As dusk settled over the landscape, Painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, they returned to the house, the scent of gunpowder clinging to their clothes. Caroline cooked supper, a simple meal of beans and cornbread, but it tasted like a feast to Levi. As they ate, a comfortable silence settled between them, a quiet understanding that transcended words. Later, as Levi lay in bed, the quiet of the night was shattered by a vivid, brutal dream. He was in a bank, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder and fear. Men in masks shouted orders, their voices distorted and menacing. He saw himself, his face hidden by a bandana, shoving sacks of money into a bag. The roar of a shotgun filled his ears, followed by the screams of terrified civilians. He saw a young woman, her eyes wide with terror, clutching a child to her chest. He woke up with a gasp, his body drenched in sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. The dream lingered in his mind, a dark stain on his consciousness. He sat up in bed, struggling to catch his breath, his hands shaking. He recognized the terror in the woman's eyes, the cold brutality of the men in masks. But he couldn't reconcile that image with the man he was now, the man who helped Caroline mend fences and read poetry aloud. He stumbled out of bed and went to the window, staring out at the moonlit landscape. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, a sanctuary from the violence of his dream. But the whispers of the past were growing louder, threatening to shatter the fragile peace he had found with Caroline. Was he truly capable of redemption, or was he doomed to be haunted by the sins of a life he couldn't even remember? He didn't know the answer, but he knew one thing. He would do everything in his power to protect Caroline from the darkness that lurked within him, even if it meant facing the demons of his past alone. He knew instinctively that she was the key to his future, to the man he desperately wanted to become. He couldn't risk losing her. The thought was unbearable. The arrival of Blackwood heat shimmered above the cracked soil, preceding riders whose silhouettes first painted the horizon. Caroline, coaxing life from a meager sunflower patch near the porch, straightened, a weathered hand shielding her gaze. Levi, his axe poised above a half-split log, arrested the swing. An inexplicable premonition coiled in his gut, a warning he couldn't ignore. "Trouble's riding in," he rumbled, more to himself than to her. She strained to see, recognizing the lead rider's posture even at that distance. "Blackwood," she stated, her tone devoid of inflection. "What grievance does he bring now?" Silas Blackwood, infamous as a plague of locusts on any land he coveted, halted his obsidian stallion before the modest ranch dwelling. 3 henchmen, stone-faced and bristling with weaponry, scanned their surroundings with hawkish intensity. Blackwood himself radiated practiced arrogance. His bespoke suit, jarring against the rugged landscape, announced both his affluence and scorn for frontier hardships. A gold watch chain winked, a quiet proclamation of dominance. "Afternoon, Miss Rivers," Blackwood drawled, his voice a silken caress laced with steel. He remained mounted, preferring the vantage point to survey the scene. "Quaint little holding you've carved out, though perhaps a touch remote." Caroline met his gaze unflinchingly. "It suffices, Mr. Blackwood. What summons you out this way?" He chuckled, a dry, mirthless sound. "Direct, as ever." "I appreciate that, Caroline. Time is, after all, a commodity. Speaking of which," he nodded to one of his men, who produced a weighty envelope and tossed it carelessly near Caroline's feet. "Consider that, generous proposition for your holdings." Caroline ignored the fallen envelope. "My land is not for purchase, Mr. Blackwood. A position I've made abundantly clear." Blackwood's smile remained, but his eyes sharpened to a glint. Everything possesses its price point, Miss Rivers. You simply haven't encountered yours as yet. Envision the possibilities this could unlock. A fresh start, perhaps, in a more refined setting. Surely this desolate existence is taxing for a woman alone. I am not alone, Caroline retorted, steel entering her voice. She glanced at Levi, who stood silently by the woodpile, his axe grounded. His expression was veiled, but a palpable tension thrummed in his stance. Blackwood tracked her gaze, his eyes lingering on Levi with undisguised suspicion. "And to whom do we owe this pleasure?" he inquired, his tone dripping with barely concealed disdain. "A newly acquired farm hand? Or something with greater intimacy?" "That remains outside your purview, Mr. Blackwood," Caroline snapped. "Now, if you will excuse us, we have labors to resume." Blackwood disregarded her dismissal. He urged his horse closer, his eyes fixed on Levi. "He seems familiar," he pondered, tapping a gloved finger against his chin. "Have our paths crossed prior, friend?" Levi locked gazes with Blackwood, his own eyes glacial. He registered a fleeting sensation, a fractured memory, an incomplete image which dissipated swiftly. "I believe not," he answered, his voice low and even. "I possess a memory for faces that matter." Blackwood's smile returned, but it now possessed a razor's edge. "Possibly. Or perhaps you are attempting to bury the past. There are things that are best left undisturbed, wouldn't you concur?" The words hung suspended, an implied menace that sent a chill racing down Caroline's spine. "Remove yourself from my property, Blackwood," she demanded, her voice trembling with repressed fury. Blackwood chuckled again, the sound grating on Levi's nerves. "Such animosity, Caroline. It's regressible, as we could have forged a mutually beneficial partnership. However, if you insist on recalcitrance—" He shrugged. "Do not claim you received no forewarning. Land in these parts has been known to change hands. Accidents occur, as you are no doubt aware. A runaway blaze, a sudden stampede, occurrences can swiftly spiral beyond one's control." He paused, allowing his words to penetrate. "Simply consider my offer, Caroline, before it reaches the point of irreversibility." Casting a final, appraising look at Levi, he wheeled his horse around. "Gentlemen," he addressed his entourage, "let us depart." The riders retreated as swiftly as they had arrived, leaving a swirling vortex of dust to settle. Caroline stood paralyzed, her fists clenched tight. Levi watched them disappear, his eyes narrowed, jaw hard. The disquiet in his stomach had escalated, yielding to a fervent protectiveness. "He will not cease," Caroline murmured, her voice a bare whisper. "He desires this land, and he will stop at nothing to obtain it." Levi stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. His touch was gentle, yet resolute. "He shall not harm you, Caroline. I shall not permit it." The words were unadorned, but spoken with a conviction that reverberated within her soul. She looked up at him, her eyes probing his. "But what of you, Levi? He recognized you. What if he possesses knowledge of your past?" Levi's expression darkened. "Then I will confront it. Whatever lingers there, I will ensure it does not cause you harm. You extended me a chance when I possessed nothing. I am in your debt for all that I am." He gazed out at the receding riders, his gaze hardening. The axe lay forgotten on the ground. The sun beat relentlessly, while the wind whispered through the sunflowers, carrying an unspoken premonition of an approaching storm. The tranquility they had discovered on the ranch lay shattered, supplanted by a looming menace that would test their mettle and their determination. Levi knew, with an instinct beyond recollection, that the battle for Caroline, for the ranch, and for his own absolution had only just commenced. A stranger's questions, a plume of dust, kicked up by a relentless wind, marked the approach of a solitary rider toward Harmony Creek. Tall and sinewy, his gaze, sharp as a raptor's, swept across the terrain. A long coat flapped behind him, offering a fleeting view of a well-worn holster riding low on his thigh. He headed directly for the sheriff's office, his mount's steady cadence echoing off the parched earth. Inside, Sheriff Brody nursed tepid coffee, morning light etching stark shadows across his cluttered workspace. He glanced up as the stranger entered, a flicker of guarded curiosity creasing his leathery features. "What can I do for you?" The man removed his hat, revealing closely cropped dark hair. "Seeking information, Sheriff, regarding a certain individual." Brody leaned back, his eyes narrowing perceptibly. "Folks are always drifting through. Name?" "Boone. Goes by Levi Boone." The stranger's voice, a low rasp, held a deliberate cadence. "Word is he's keeping a low profile around here." Brody's gaze hardened subtly. "Never heard that name. Not a complete fabrication." The man Caroline sheltered went by Levi now, but Brody knew nothing of his history, and he meant to keep it that way. "We call this place Harmony Creek for a reason. We don't cotton to trouble." A mirthless smile touched the stranger's lips, a smile that failed to ignite his eyes. "Trouble has a way of finding some folks, Sheriff, regardless of where they try to disappear." "Merely seeking an old associate. Significant height, broad build, a slight scar marring the skin above his left eye. Answers to Ba. Levi Boone." He paused, allowing the details to register. "Does that spark any recognition?" Brody held his stare, unflinching. "Nope. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got duties to attend to." The stranger settled his hat back on his head, the brim obscuring his expression. "I appreciate your time, Sheriff." He turned and exited, the swirling dust embracing him as he mounted his horse and steered it towards the general store. Caroline was inside, organizing a recent delivery of textiles. The store bell announced the stranger's entry, and she offered a welcoming smile. That smile wavered slightly as she registered his piercing scrutiny. An unsettling aura emanated from him, a palpable sense of restrained power. "Afternoon, ma'am," he greeted, his voice retaining that same gravelly timbre. "Might you be acquainted with a man calling himself Levi Boone?" Caroline's heart leaped in her chest. She feigned focus on the fabrics, her fingers betraying a slight tremor. "Never heard of him," she responded, her tone a shade too bright. The stranger leaned against the counter, his eyes unwavering. "He's a sizable man, difficult to overlook. Some whisper he's a natural with horses. Others claim he has a talent with firearms." Caroline compelled herself to meet his searching gaze. "This is a quiet town. We have little use for guns here." "Quiet, is it?" A low chuckle escaped him, a sound that prickled her skin. "Some men simply can't outrun their former selves, no matter how far they run to hide. Are you certain you haven't seen him, Levi Boone?" Caroline shook her head, her voice firm despite the tremble in her hands. "I told you, I don't know anyone by that name. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have customers requiring my attention." The stranger straightened, his eyes still boring into her. "Just pursuing a few leads, ma'am. No offense intended." He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of polite dismissal. "Thank you for your consideration." He turned and departed, leaving Caroline feeling chilled and profoundly uneasy. She watched him ride off, her thoughts racing. Levi had been so placid, so compassionate, but this stranger's questions, they conjured a different image, a fugitive fleeing something ominous and hazardous. She couldn't dispel the notion that Levi was in peril and that she must safeguard him. She hastily saddled her horse and raced back to the ranch, the wind lashing at her hair. Upon arrival, she found Levi in the corral, caring for the horses. He looked up as she approached, concern etching lines on his forehead. "Caroline? What's wrong? You look like you've seen something unsettling." She dismounted, her voice laced with urgency. "Levi, a stranger rode into town. He was inquiring about you." Levi's complexion paled. "Inquiring about me? What was his purpose?" "He asked if anyone knew a man named Levi Boone. He described you. The scar above your eye, your physique. He alluded to a skill with horses or a gun." Levi turned away, his cane, fists clenching. The memories, fragments of a forgotten past, churned in his mind like a raging torrent. He could feel a dark presence gathering within him, the echoes of a life he couldn't consciously recall, yet somehow knew was tainted with torment and brutality. "Levi," Caroline murmured, reaching to touch his arm. "Who is Levi Boone?" He turned back, his eyes clouded with bewilderment and apprehension. "I don't know," he breathed. "I can't recall." "But you felt something, didn't you?" Caroline pressed, her voice gentle but unwavering. "When I repeated what he said, you felt something stir." Levi nodded slowly. "It was a shadow. A malevolent shadow that eludes my grasp. But it's there, lurking within me, waiting to break free." Caroline enfolded his hands in hers, her eyes brimming with steadfast love and resolve. "Then we'll confront it together," she declared. "Whatever your past entails, it doesn't define you. You're not that man anymore, Levi. You're the man who helped me rebuild my barn, the man who reads poetry to me by the fire, the man who brings laughter into my life. You're the man I love." Levi squeezed her hands, his heart swelling with gratitude and a fierce protectiveness. He didn't know his true identity or what he might have done, but he knew one thing, with absolute certainty: he would do anything to shield Caroline. He wouldn't allow his past to shatter the life they had painstakingly built, the hope they had discovered in each other's embrace. "He'll return," Levi stated, his voice low and resolute. "I can sense it, and when he does, I'll be prepared." Caroline nodded, her eyes radiating unwavering determination. "We'll be ready, together." She knew that whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them as one, their love a bulwark against the darkness threatening to engulf them. Echoes of the darker life, the saloon doors crashed inward, announcing the stranger's arrival with jarring force, momentarily leaching the color from the room's lively atmosphere. His gaze, a honed blade, sliced through the haze of smoke and chatter, landing squarely on Levi, who sat nursing a beer with Caroline at a shadowed table. Her hand rested on his forearm, a gesture of quiet intimacy. The newcomer advanced, each step a deliberate act of trespass, the air around him crackling with veiled menace. He loomed over Levi, eclipsing the meager light. Sunbeams, fractured by grime-coated windows, painted swirling patterns of dust. "Levi Boone," he rumbled, his voice a gravelly rasp that silenced the room's murmur. "Fancy finding you playing house." Levi's muscles coiled tight, his grip tightened on the glass. Caroline's fingers pressed harder into his arm, a silent plea. He met the stranger's flinty stare, confusion and a prickle of apprehension creasing his brow. "You've mistaken me for someone else," Levi replied, his voice even despite the sudden knot in his stomach. "My name is Levi. Just Levi. A mirthless bark escaped the stranger's lips. Spare me the charade, Boone. That scar above your eye, a souvenir from the Black Creek stagecoach heist. Remember relieving those passengers of their burdens? The old biddy nearly swallowed her pearls whole. A cruel light danced in the stranger's eyes. A wave of icy foreboding washed over Levi. A fragmented image, a coach toppled into a muddy ravine. A woman's terrified face flickered in his mind. He flinched inwardly, shoving the vision back. "I've no idea what you're talking about," he protested, his voice gaining an edge. "I've never robbed a stagecoach in my life." Caroline's grip tightened further, her expression a mask of worry. She saw genuine bewilderment warring with something else, something buried, something dark. "Oh, I think you do," the stranger insisted, invading Levi's personal space. He emanated a sharp odor of stale liquor and trail grit. "You rode with the Devil's Hand, Boone. Remember Jericho, Silas, and that Viper Maeve? You were their muscle, the one who reveled in the dirty work." He paused, letting the words hang like executioner's nooses. "You carved a swathe of pain across 3 territories." Levi surged to his feet, the chair clattering to the floor, the sound amplified in the sudden hush that descended. He towered over the stranger, fists bunched at his sides. "I said you've got the wrong man. I don't know any Devil's Hand. No Jericho, Silas, or Maeve rings a bell. My memory is gone. I don't remember any of it." The stranger remained unmoved, his gaze unwavering. "A convenient malady. But the past is a relentless hound, Boone. You cannot outrun your nature, no matter how you contort it." He spat, a viscous blob, marring the floor near Levi's boots. "They're hunting you, Boone. They want what you stole, and their methods will lack my restraint." Sheriff Brody, having observed the confrontation from the bar, sauntered forward, his hand hovering near his holstered gun. "That's enough, friend," he stated, his voice carrying an iron core. "Whatever grievance you harbor with Levi, take it elsewhere. This is a peaceful community, and we discourage disturbances." The stranger flickered a glance at Brody, his lip curling with disdain. "Merely relaying a message, Sheriff. Wouldn't want the innocent souls of Harmony Creek caught in the whirlwind when Boone's sins come knocking." He reverted his attention to Levi, his voice dropping to a venomous murmur. "Hide behind your amnesia, Boone, but it is a paper shield. They will unearth you, and once they do—" He let the threat linger, unspoken. With a final piercing stare, the stranger pivoted and exited the saloon, the doors swinging wildly in his wake. The ensuing silence was thick and suffocating, broken only by the anxious rustling of the remaining patrons. Levi stood paralyzed, his lungs laboring, his mind a maelstrom. The stranger's accusations reverberated in his skull, each one a wrecking ball against the foundations of his reconstructed life. He turned to Caroline, her face etched with apprehension, and saw the dawning of fear in her eyes. Had he been deceiving her? Himself? Was he, in truth, the monster the stranger portrayed? His hand raked through his hair, his fingers trembling. The fleeting, fractured visions of carnage and shadow suddenly possessed a terrifying tangibility. He had dismissed them as mere nightmares, echoes of a forgotten past. But what if they were suppressed memories? What if he had indeed committed the acts described? "Levi," Caroline whispered, reaching for him. "Don't believe him. He's trying to unnerve you." Levi recoiled, unable to hold her gaze. "But what if he's right, Caroline? What if it's all authentic?" "It's irrelevant," she asserted, her voice firm. "What matters is the man you are now. You are not that person anymore. I know it." But did he? Did he truly know himself? The stranger's poison had taken root, a malignant seed threatening to strangle everything he held dear. He scanned the saloon, the faces of those he had come to cherish, those he had sworn to protect. Could he genuinely trust himself to safeguard them? Or was he doomed to unleash chaos and devastation upon their tranquil existence? He spun on his heel and strode out of the saloon, leading Caroline and Sheriff Brody rooted to the spot, their faces etched with concern. He needed solitude to confront the demons stirring within, to definitively determine his identity, his destiny. The sinking sun cast elongated, distorted shadows across the parched street, mirroring the tempest raging within his soul. He headed towards the open range, the vast, uncharted territory stretching before him, a daunting reflection of the uncertain future that awaited. Caroline interposed herself between Levi and the newcomer, her shadow a stark line across the man's leathery features. The air thrummed with a palpable unease, heavier than the grit that danced around their ankles. He introduced himself as Levi, she stated, her tone resolute, masking the tremor that threatened to surface. And that's all that matters to me. The stranger's gaze, sharp as flint, darted between Caroline and Levi, a silent assessment. Amnesia! Quite the convenient cloak, wouldn't you say, Boone? Buries a multitude of sins. He punctuated his words with a stream of tobacco juice, the splat a jarring intrusion in the sudden hush. He has no memory, Caroline countered, her eyes locked on the stranger's. And I trust him. Levi watched her, his chest tight. Her steadfast belief was a soothing balm on the chaos within, yet amplified his gnawing guilt. What if this man spoke the truth? What if this kind soul was placing her faith in a monster's shell? A dry chuckle escaped the stranger's lips, a sound like rustling parchment. Believe what you will, lady, but when the devil's hand comes to collect, don't claim you weren't warned. With a mocking tip of his hat, he pivoted and ambled back toward the saloon, his spurs a percussive rhythm against the packed earth. Caroline waited for him to vanish before turning to Levi, her face etched with concern. "Are you all right?" she inquired, her hand extending towards his arm. He recoiled slightly, a reflexive gesture. I don't know," he admitted, his voice a mere breath. He said Boone, devil's hand. It sparked something, like a half-remembered terror clawing at the edges of my mind. Gently, Caroline framed his face with her hands, her thumbs stroking the angles of his cheekbones. "Look at me, Levi. That's not you. I know you. I see the empathy in your eyes, the goodness in your heart. Don't let this drifter plant seeds of doubt." He peered into her eyes, searching for an anchor, for reassurance. He found only boundless love and fierce protectiveness. "But what if he's right, Caroline? What if I am that person?"
"I'd never forgive myself if I brought harm to you, to anyone here."
"Then we'll face it as one," she declared, her voice ringing with unshakable resolve. "We'll uncover the truth, whatever shape it takes. And no matter what shadows haunt your past, I believe in your capacity for change. I see the man you are striving to become." Taking his hand, she guided him towards the house. The setting sun painted the plains in fiery hues, a breathtaking vista marred by the stranger's ominous pronouncements. Inside, Caroline lit a lamp, bathing the humble room in a comforting glow. She indicated for Levi to sit at the table, then filled a mug with steaming coffee. Silence hung heavy between them, laden with unspoken anxieties and uncertainties. "Tell me what you can recall," she prompted softly, slicing through the quiet. "Anything at all." Levi closed his eyes, focusing on the fragmented images that flickered just beyond his reach. "Brutality," he began, his voice tight with effort. Guns, screams, the reek of blood and burnt powder, and a woman. Her face is obscured, but I remember her laughter. It was brittle, scornful. He faltered, struggling to assemble the disjointed pieces. A blaze, too. A building consumed by flames. Cries of agony. He shuddered, opening his eyes to meet Caroline's worried gaze. It's all a chaotic jumble. It defies any sense. Across the table, Caroline clasped his hand, her touch a source of stability. It's all right, she soothed. Don't force it. We'll unravel it slowly. For the next hour, she listened with infinite patience as Levi recounted every fleeting memory, every fragmented vision, every surge of emotion. With gentle prodding, she encouraged him to delve deeper into the recesses of his mind. As he spoke, a sharper picture began to materialize, a portrait of a man hardened by violence, a man who had witnessed and participated in unspeakable acts. But there were also nascent glimmers of something more, something obscured beneath layers of cynicism and callousness, a spark of empathy, a pang of regret, a longing for redemption. When he had finished, Levi felt utterly spent, emotionally drained. He looked at Caroline, his eyes mirroring his despair. "Do you understand now?" he asked, his voice raspy with exhaustion. "Do you see what I am? What I was?" Caroline squeezed his hand, her gaze unwavering in its intensity. "I see a man tormented by his demons," she replied. "A man grappling with the weight of his past. But I also see a man capable of profound love, immense compassion. And that's the man I choose to believe in." Rising, she walked to the window, her gaze lost in the encroaching darkness. "I've known my own share of shadows, Levi," she confessed, a touch of melancholy coloring her voice. "I understand what it's like to be haunted by the echoes of yesterday, but I also know that healing is possible, that new beginnings can be forged." Turning back to him, her eyes glimmered with barely suppressed tears. "You gave me that, Levi. You showed me that it's possible to embrace love again, to rebuild trust. I refuse to let some transient stranger steal that from me." Levi pushed himself up from his chair and crossed to her, his heart overflowing with gratitude and affection. Tenderly, he framed her face with his hands, his thumbs tracing the delicate curves of her cheekbones. "I don't deserve you, Caroline," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't deserve your faith, your love." "Hush," she murmured, pressing her fingers to his lips. "You do. You deserve every kindness this world has to offer, Levi. And I'm going to help you find it." He lowered his head and kissed her, a slow, tender exchange that conveyed unspoken promises and unwavering commitment. In that instant, he knew he would stop at nothing to protect her, to shield her from the darkness that threatened to consume them. He would confront his past, no matter how harrowing, and he would strive to prove himself worthy of her love. He would become the man she saw within him. Standing embraced in the soft lamplight, a newfound resolve steeled Levi's spirit. He couldn't foresee the future, but he knew he wasn't alone in facing it. He had Caroline, and her love was a beacon against the encroaching shadows. He wouldn't fail her. Seeds of doubt, the morning air's sharp teeth sank deeper than usual as Levi headed for the market. The unfamiliar scratch of his new coat served as a constant reminder of his transformed existence. He sensed Caroline's watchful presence as he left the cabin, a silent pledge of devotion and a fierce guardianship that provided more comfort than any hearth. But that solace faded quickly. Nearing the stalls overflowing with goods, The customary friendly greetings morphed into suspicious glances and muted murmurs. Mrs. Abernathy, usually eager for Caroline's loaves, clutched her basket possessively and averted her eyes, her mouth a tight line of disapproval. Even little Timmy, who normally buzzed with questions about his carvings, shrank behind his mother, his eyes wide with an unsettling fear. Seeking answers, he approached the butcher. "Morning, Earl," Levi greeted, forcing a smile. Earl, a hulking figure with eternally bloodied hands, simply grunted, the rhythmic scrape of his cleaver against steel slicing through the quiet. "Everything all right, Earl?" Levi pressed, a tense coil tightening in his gut. At last, Earl looked up, his eyes slits of animosity. "Heard whispers, Boone." He spat, the name laced with venomous disdain. "About who you really are, about the Devil's Hand." Levi's breath caught. The Devil's Hand. The moniker resonated within him, a dissonant chord echoing the fragmented violence haunting the fringes of his memory. Fleeting images assaulted him, a conflagrant blaze, panicked faces, the steely glint of a pistol beneath a crimson sky. I don't understand," Levi stammered, the denial ringing false even in his own ears. He desperately wanted to believe in the man he had become, the man Caroline cherished, but doubt had infiltrated his mind, taking root with alarming speed. "Don't feign innocence with me," Earl snarled, slamming his cleaver into the block. "Words out. Silas, he's told everyone. The stagecoach heists, the murders, the whole sordid story. Silas, the outsider. The man who had shattered the delicate tranquility Levi had struggled to create. He was poisoning the town, turning its people against him, forcing him to confront a past he didn't recall but instinctively feared. Levi turned away, the burden of the town's judgment crushing him. Each averted gaze, each hushed aside, hammered another nail into the coffin of his new identity. He stumbled through the marketplace, the riot of colors and activity blurring into a dizzying vortex of suspicion and terror. Reaching the town's edge, a particularly vivid flashback struck him with the force of a physical blow. He was astride a horse, face concealed by a bandana. A stagecoach stood immobilized on the open road, its passengers cowering. He saw his own hand. His hand lift a pistol, the gunshot shattering the vast silence of the plains. The image was brutal, stark, undeniably authentic. He doubled over, clutching his head, the memory burning into his consciousness. Was this his true self? The monster he had been? The notion was unbearable. He bolted, running until the haven of the woods enveloped him. He leaned against a towering pine, the rough bark biting into his back, and sank to the ground. He scrutinized his hands, turning them over and over, seeking some telltale sign of the killer they might have been. He saw only the weathered hands of a craftsman, hands that had fashioned furniture and carved playthings, hands that had tenderly caressed Caroline's face. But the memory lingered, a dark smudge on his spirit, whispering insidious doubts. For hours, he remained lost in a maze of uncertainty and dread. He conjured Caroline, her unwavering conviction in him, her love a guiding star in the gathering gloom. Yet, even her love couldn't extinguish the visions that now plagued him, the faces of those he might have harmed, the lives he might have ruined. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the forest floor with long shadows, he knew he couldn't remain hidden indefinitely. He had to confront Caroline, confront the town, confront the truth, whatever it might hold. He walked back to the cabin, his steps leaden with foreboding. He found Caroline tending her garden, her hands stained with soil, her face peaceful in the waning light. She looked up as he drew near, her eyes filled with concern. Levi, where have you been? I was so worried, she said, her voice gentle. He couldn't meet her eyes. He glanced down at his hands, the hands that might have been stained with blood. I heard Silas's accusations, he whispered, the words barely audible. I saw things memories I fear they're true, Caroline. I fear I might be Boone. Caroline approached, cupping his face with her hands. He flinched, recoiling from her touch, fearing what she would see reflected in his eyes. Look at me, Levi, she urged, her voice firm yet soothing. Slowly he raised his head, meeting her unwavering gaze. I don't care about the shadows of your past. I care about the man you are now, the man I know you to be. You are not Boone, you are Levi, and I love you. Her declaration was a salve to his wounded spirit, yet the seed of doubt persisted, a relentless whisper in the recesses of his mind. Could he truly outrun his past? Could he ever be deserving of her affection? He didn't know, but he knew one thing. He had to discover the truth. For Caroline, for himself, he had to confront the darkness within and fight for the light. A promise of hope the river gurgled, a persistent undertone to the stifling quiet that had enveloped Levi. Perched on the verge, small stones biting into his worn trousers, he stared at the churning water. Hours had slipped by as the sinking sun stretched elongated, grotesque shapes around him, mirroring the disquiet that roiled within. The air, typically sharp and invigorating, felt suffocating, laden with unvoiced anxieties. He was adrift, a splinter of wood on a remorseless tide, buffeted by forces beyond his grasp. He hadn't registered Caroline's arrival until the subtle displacement of air announced her presence beside him. No words were spoken, no comforting gesture offered. Instead, she mirrored his posture, her focus also consumed by the river's restless dance. The ensuing stillness was profound, but not oppressive. It was a shared communion, a silent acknowledgement of the inner turmoil he battled. At last, she broke the quiet, her voice a mere breath against the water's melody. You've been withdrawn all day. Not an accusation, but a delicate invitation. Levi exhaled, the sound raw with despair. Do you ever feel trapped inside someone else's life? Caroline turned, her eyes reflecting profound, unwavering empathy. Like ill-fitting garments? She offered softly. A burdensome mantle you can't shed? He nodded, avoiding her gaze. Silas. What he said, it dredged something up. Something insidious. A shiver traced his spine as a fleeting image of a bloodied blade surfaced, too quick to fully form, leaving only a residue of chilling dread. I can't be that monster, Caroline. I can't become Boone. Caroline reached for him, her hand enveloping his. Her touch radiated warmth, offering stability, a mooring in the swirling chaos. Then refused to be. He looked at her then, his eyes pleading for reassurance. It's not that easy. What if it's inherent? What if there's no escape? Her grip tightened, unwavering. Levi, I've witnessed your actions. I see the man you are now. You are gentle. You are thoughtful. You are good. Silas's words are mere utterances. They hold no power unless you grant them that power. He desperately wanted to believe, but the seed of doubt had taken root, its tendrils already burrowing deep within his spirit. But what if they resonate with some truth? He questioned, his voice barely a whisper. What if that darkness lies dormant, awaiting its hour? Caroline didn't waver. She met his gaze directly, her eyes shining with an unshakable belief. Then we confronted together. She paused, her voice infused with quiet fortitude. Levi, I've faced my own phantoms, my own inner demons whispering lies. He looked at her, a question forming in his eyes. He knew so little of her background, only fragments gathered from fleeting conversations. She inhaled deeply, the setting sun painting her face in a warm, golden hue. My father, he was not a good man. He squandered everything on games of chance, including my mother's serenity. A pitiless man, quick to temper and quicker to violence. I existed for years in a state of fear, convinced I bore some responsibility for his choices. Levi's grip tightened on her hand. He recognized the pain etched into her features, the echoes of a past she'd fought so valiantly to overcome. For years, she continued, her voice hushed, I was certain I was fated to repeat his errors, that I carried the same malignancy within. Until, one day, I recognized I possessed a choice. I could allow his darkness to swallow me whole, or I could elect to forge a different path. I chose to be different, Levi, and so can you. She looked at him, her eyes blazing with fierce resolution. Your past is not your destiny. Your choices are. And each day you choose kindness, you choose compassion, you choose goodness. That's the man I know. Levi, that's the man I cherish. Her affirmations were like a soothing balm to his wounded soul. He yearned to trust, to cling to her unwavering faith, but the fear persisted, a frigid weight in his gut. But what if he began again? The doubts clawing their way to the surface. Caroline silenced him, her voice firm. Enough what-ifs, Levi. Not now. Not anymore. The past is immutable, but the future remains unwritten. We can shape a life together. A life brimming with affection and hope. But it demands that you don't constantly glance backward, anticipating the shadows. She rose, drawing him up with her. The final rays of sunlight painted the sky in a symphony of orange shah. And violet, a breathtaking spectacle set against the encroaching darkness. Look at this, Levi, she urged, gesturing towards the vista. Witness the beauty surrounding us. This is our life. Levi, our sanctuary. Don't surrender it to the ghosts of yesterday. He gazed at her, at the unwavering courage in her expression, at the love that burned so brightly. He saw not only her loveliness, but her resilience, her empathy, her unwavering trust in him. And in that moment, something within him shifted. The fear didn't completely vanish, but it subsided, replaced by a tentative spark of hope. He clasped her hand, his grip strong, his gaze steadfast. You're right, he declared, his voice stronger now, imbued with newfound determination. No more dwelling on what-ifs. I am not Boone, I am Levi, and I choose to be the man you believe I am. He gathered her close, embracing her tightly, burying his face in her hair. He inhaled her fragrance, a blend of wildflowers and sunshine, a reminder of the shared life they were constructing, a life deserving of a fight. I promise you, Caroline, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. I will not allow my past to sabotage our future. I will wage war for you, for us, for the life we've created. She held him tightly, her arms encircling his waist, her body pressed against his. I know you will, she responded, her voice laced with affection. And I'll be beside you, every step of the way. They stood there for a long while, entwined in the fading light, two souls united. Bound by affection and hope, a promise whispered against the gathering night. The river continued its murmuring psalm, a constant echo of time's relentless progression, of a past irreversible, but also of a future beckoning. ready to be molded. Blackwood's offer whirlwinds of grit spun across the baked earth as Silas Blackwood's buggy crunched its way to the river's spread. Caroline, perched on the porch swing, observed his approach, her face a mask. Levi was out, trailing the stray south toward the river, leaving her to confront Blackwood's agenda solo. For months, she'd felt his acquisitive gaze, sensed his coveting of her land. Now, with Levi's history looming over them like an approaching squall, she knew he smelled weakness. Blackwood halted his team, dust motes swirling around the buggy's gleaming spokes. He descended, his polished boots incongruous against the arid ground. Smoothing his tailored waistcoat, offered a brittle smile. "Miss Rivers," he drawled, with a tip of his hat. "A glorious day. Wouldn't you agree?" Caroline straightened, her gaze unwavering. "Mr. Blackwood, what brings you calling?" No invitation to sit was offered. A dry chuckle escaped him, a sound like gravel grinding. "Pleasure? While I always appreciate the sight of a beautiful woman, I confess this visit leans more toward business." He let the silence thicken, a pregnant pause. "News travels, Miss Rivers, concerning your associate." Caroline's jaw hardened. "Levi is a guest here, a guest burdened by a troubled past, wouldn't you say? Boone's reputation. Men are already revisiting that name." Blackwood edged closer, his voice a sibilant murmur. "Dangerous men are taking notice. Of you, by extension." Caroline stood firm. "Levi has done nothing wrong. He's trying to forge a new life." Blackwood's smile widened, tinged with something predatory. "Trying is the crux of the matter, isn't it? Can you truly vouch that he won't backslide? Can you assure your own safety, Miss Rivers?" "Because I can." She folded her arms, unimpressed. "And what, pray tell, are you proposing, Mr. Blackwood?" "A mutually beneficial arrangement," he purred. "I offer protection. My men, my resources." In return, his gaze swept the expanse of the ranch, the barn, the cultivated fields. "You concede your claim. Sell me the land. A generous price, of course." "More than generous, considering the current predicament." Caroline's laugh was a short, sharp burst that cut through the still air. "You think I'm intimidated? You think I'd surrender my home, my livelihood, because you're trying to frighten me? Don't mistake caution for cowardice, Miss Rivers. I'm offering a way out, a means to sidestep the impending disaster. Boone, or whatever he's calling himself, is a lightning rod for trouble. Trouble that will engulf you, obliterate everything you've cultivated here. This land has been in my family for generations, Mr. Blackwood. I've weathered worse storms, and will weather this one also." Her voice held granite strength. "And I certainly won't be strong-armed into selling by you, or anyone else." Blackwood's eyes turned to chips of flint. The polished veneer splintered, revealing the ruthless ambition beneath. "You're making a mistake, Caroline. A critical one. This isn't solely about the land. It's a question of survival." "Leave my property, Silas," she said, her tone suddenly glacial, "before I discard any sense of propriety." He closed the distance between them, invading her space. "Consider it, Caroline. Consider what's best for you. For your future." She didn't yield an inch. "My future is here. With or without you." Her hand snaked out, grasping the shotgun propped against the porch post, the metallic snick of the hammer amplified in the silence. "I said, get off my land." Blackwood's face darkened with suppressed rage. He recognized a lost cause, at least for the moment. He retreated a step, his eyes smoldering. "You'll regret this, Caroline. You'll come begging when the wolves are howling at your door." "I seriously doubt that will happen," she retorted, leveling the shotgun. He spun on his heel, clambering back into the buggy. He didn't glance back as he flicked the reins, the horses pulling the buggy away in a billowing cloud of dust. Caroline followed his departure, her grip tightening on the shotgun. This wasn't over. Blackwood wouldn't relent. He'd return, and his methods might not be so refined next time. The sun scorched her back, the air thick with the scent of sage and parched earth. She lowered the shotgun, but her vigilance remained absolute. She had to safeguard her home, protect Levi, protect the life they were striving to create, even if it meant standing alone against the gathering shadows. She pictured Levi, his kind gaze, his calloused hands, his quiet determination. He was worth defending. And she wouldn't permit Blackwood, or any adversary, to wrest him away. She would defy them. Ambush-long shadows stretched from the cottonwoods as Levi steered Jericho homeward. The air, usually a tonic of pine and sage, felt stifling, pregnant with a nameless dread that tightened his shoulders. He nudged Jericho into a swifter gait, the cadence of hoofbeats a small island of calm in the rising disquiet. Patrolling the north fence line typically grounded him, forging a bond with the land he was growing to cherish. Not today. Blackwood's unwelcome presence had soured everything, leaving a sediment of worry clinging like burrs. Rounding a dogleg in the trail, he found them, 4 figures barring his way, their expressions flinty, their mounts skittish. He recognized the ringleader at once, the interloper from town, the one whose gaze held unnerving recognition, the one who'd uttered the name Boone. Levi hauled Jericho to a halt, the horse blowing and shuffling. "Afternoon," he greeted, his voice measured. This wasn't happenstance. It was a blockade, pure and simple. The stranger swung down, his movements lithe and menacing. He advanced toward Levi, boots scuffing the parched soil. The setting sun flashed off the tin star pinned to his chest, a twisted joke of justice. "Boone," he drawled, the name coated with disdain. "We need a word." "I don't know any Boone," Levi countered, his grip firm on the reins. "My name is Levi," a grating chuckle was the reply. "Spare me the act, Boone. We both know who you are, or rather, who you used to be." He halted a few feet away, his stare unwavering and intense. "An offer's been made." "I'm not interested," Levi stated, his fingers instinctively clenching. He ached to wheel Jericho around and bolt, to create distance between himself and these men. But escape wouldn't come easily, not with 4 opponents pinning him. "You will be," the stranger insisted, his tone softening into something almost honeyed, yet still harder than steel. "A simple snatch. A bank down in Redemption. Easy pickings." "Redemption?" Levi's brow furrowed, the name sparking a dim, distant echo within him, a jolt of recognition laced with a deep-seated foreboding. He suppressed it, focusing on the immediate threat. "I told you, I'm not party to robbing banks." "Don't play the innocent, Boone," one of the others barked, his voice coarse and impatient. "It's in your blood." Levi shot him a glare, his anger flaring. "I'm not that man anymore." The stranger's smile was chilling, a calculating curve that sent a tremor down Levi's spine. "Everyone's got that man inside, Boone. Some just hide him better. We know your debt's the ranch, Caroline." Levi's blood congealed. They knew about Caroline. That was beyond the pale. "Keep her out of this," he growled, his voice laced with rising fury. "Then be reasonable," the stranger purred. "This isn't a request, Boone. It's an order. You're riding with us. The payday arrives tomorrow morning." "I said no," Levi repeated, his voice a flinty edge. He knew what he had to do. Shield Caroline, safeguard the life they were building. Even if it involved wrestling demons he thought buried. The stranger sighed theatrically. "I was hoping you'd be sensible, but you always were headstrong, Boone." He nodded to his men. "Take him." They surged forward, two flanking Levi, reaching. Reaction was instinct. Levi spurred Jericho into a dizzying spin, sending one man sprawling. His revolver materialized in his hand, a move honed by practice he could barely recall, a ghost of his old self resurfacing. A shot cracked into the air, the sound ricocheting off the trees. "I don't want a shootout," Levi warned, his voice a tightrope of control. "But I will if I have to. I'm not slipping back into that life." The stranger merely laughed, a brittle sound. "You think you get a say, Boone. You always were a sentimental fool." He drew his own weapon, a polished Colt Peacemaker that gleamed. "Let's gauge how much of that new existence you're willing to bleed for." The brawl was savage, a maelstrom of gunfire and desperate lunges. Levi fought with a raw intensity he hadn't known he possessed, fueled by his love for Caroline and a fervent need to protect her. His movements were lightning quick, impossibly precise, his body recalling reflexes his mind had disavowed. He dodged lead, disarmed assailants, and fought with a desperate elegance that both frightened and thrilled him. A knife flashed, thrown. Levi deflected it, but the blade ripped along his forearm, painting a scarlet line. He bit back a curse, adrenaline surging. He slammed the butt of his revolver against the attacker's temple, the man collapsing like a felled tree. The stranger observed the chaos, his face a mask of amusement and annoyance. He seemed almost disappointed by Levi's resistance. "You're just delaying the inevitable, Boone," he called, firing a shot that whizzed past Levi's ear. "You can't run far enough to escape yourself." Levi ignored him, single-minded. He knew the stranger aimed to rattle him, to break his resolve. He refused to allow it. He refused to permit his past to dictate his future. He managed to unseat one of the men. As he struggled to stand, Levi kicked the gun away, then scrambled on top of him, a swift punch knocking the man unconscious. He spurred Jericho forward, charging the stranger. The stranger raised his gun, poised to fire, but Levi was too fast. He ducked, seizing the stranger's arm and wrenching it. The weapon clattered to the dirt. Levi dismounted, towering over him, his revolver trained on his head. His breath came in ragged gasps, his body screaming, his arm throbbing. But his eyes were clear, his purpose unshaken. "Last chance," Levi said, his voice a low growl. "Leave Caroline alone. Leave me alone. Disappear." The stranger glared up, his face twisted with hate. "You can't outrun your shadow, Boone," he spat. "It always gains on you." "Maybe," Levi conceded. "But I'm done running. Now I'm standing my ground." He pressed the barrel against the stranger's forehead. "Get out of here." The stranger, seeing the unwavering conviction in Levi's gaze, finally yielded. He gave a curt nod, signaling his remaining men. They wrestled their injured comrades onto their horses and vanished into the gathering gloom. Levi watched them depart, his body trembling with depletion. He lowered his gun, his hand shaking. The rush of adrenaline ebbed, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. He glanced at his bleeding arm, the gash a brutal reminder of the violence he had just embraced. He hauled himself back onto Jericho, his movements weary. He knew this was only a prelude. the stranger wouldn't be deterred easily. And Levi knew his murky past was closing in. But he was prepared. He would confront it head-on, with Caroline at his side. He would fight for his fragile new life, for his absolution, for the woman who had offered him a future. He turned Jericho toward the ranch, Caroline's face a guiding light in the encroaching night. He needed to get back to her, to embrace her, to convince himself that everything he was battling for was real. A fight for redemption, the air tasted of grit and impending doom. Blackwood's smile was a quick, venomous thing, amusement dancing in his eyes like wicked sprites as his fingers dug into Caroline's arm. Despite the obvious pain etched on her face, she met his gaze, chin high. "Didn't figure you for the domestic type, Boone." Blackwood's voice, a gravelly rumble, sliced through the quiet. "Playing farmer, playing devoted." He spat the word devoted like poison. "But old habits die hard, right? You can't bury what you are." A chill snaked down Levi's spine. He glimpsed fear in Caroline's eyes, instantly replaced by a resolve that sparked his admiration. Blackwood's self-satisfied smirk promised a game he believed already won. He edged forward, his hand instinctively nearing the Colt peacemaker. "Let her go, Blackwood." Levi's tone, though measured, carried an undeniable edge. "This doesn't concern her." Blackwood barked a laugh, a sound as unpleasant as nails on glass. "Oh, but it does, Boone. It all bleeds together. She's your linchpin, isn't she? The thing that gives you pause. The reason you haven't returned." He pressed the cold steel of his revolver against Caroline's temple. "Tell me, Boone, what's her life worth to you? Enough to forsake this idyllic charade, enough to remember where you truly belong." Caroline's eyes locked with Levi's, a silent plea etched within them. Don't yield. Don't let him resurrect the man he'd buried. Levi's jaw hardened. Images, fractured and searing, assaulted him, the faces of his former cohorts, the adrenaline of lawless acts, the unforgiving reality of his past life. Yet, these were overlaid with Caroline's image, her laughter, the comforting warmth of her touch. He envisioned quiet evenings on the porch, the sweet fragrance of wildflowers, the tantalizing prospect of a future he'd once deemed impossible. "She's priceless," Levi declared, his voice resonating with unwavering resolve. "And I swear, you won't lay a finger on her." The smirk wavered on Blackwood's lips, replaced by a flicker of doubt. "You'd forfeit everything for her? The wealth? The influence, our brotherhood?" "There was never a brotherhood, Blackwood," Levi countered, his hand now firmly grasping the revolver's handle. "And this isn't a loss. This is finally choosing something that matters." The air vibrated with tension, thick and stifling. Blackwood's men stirred, their grip tightening on their weapons. A lone fly buzzed nearby, its drone unnaturally loud in the sudden stillness. "You're making a mistake, Boone," Blackwood warned, his voice now a sharpened blade. "A final one, perhaps," Levi conceded, his gaze never leaving Blackwood's. "But it's mine to make." With a speed fueled by desperation and ingrained instinct, Levi unholstered his revolver. The shot reverberated through the valley, shattering the strained quiet. It was aimed not at Blackwood himself, but at the hand wielding the weapon against Caroline's head. Blackwood howled in agony and surprise, his revolver clattering to the ground as blood blossomed across his hand. Caroline recoiled, stumbling backward, her eyes wide with disbelief. Levi positioned himself between her and Blackwood, a human shield. The world erupted in a storm of gunfire. Projectiles whizzed past, spurting soil and carving splinters from wood. Levi returned fire, his movements economical and deadly, honed by years of experience his conscious mind tried to disown. He saw one man crumple, clutching his chest, another scramble for cover behind a wagon. He seized Caroline's hand, dragging her toward the relative sanctuary of the barn. "Get inside! Stay low!" he shouted above the deafening barrage. She hesitated, her eyes mirroring both terror and disbelief. Then, with a decisive nod, she turned and fled. Levi watched her go, an overwhelming urge to protect her surging through him. He wouldn't allow them to harm her. He wouldn't allow them to destroy the life they had nurtured. He dove behind a stack of hay bales, seeking refuge. The aroma of dried grass filled his senses, a stark contrast to the bitter tang of gunpowder. He reloaded his revolver, his actions automatic, his thoughts racing. He had to draw them away from the farm, away from Caroline. Peeking from behind the hay, he assessed the layout. 3 men remained, spaced around the yard, firing blindly. Blackwood cradled his injured hand, his face a canvas of pure rage. Levi inhaled deeply, focusing his mind, banishing fear and uncertainty. He was no longer just Levi. He was Boone, and he would fight for everything he held dear. He moved with swift purpose, using the terrain and shadows as allies. He eliminated one man foolish enough to expose himself, the sharp crack of his revolver echoing through the valley. The remaining 2 adversaries grew cautious, their movements more measured. Blackwood, his face a mask of fury, began to advance, utilizing the overturned wagon as concealment. "You can't win, Boone!" he yelled. "You can't escape your past." Levi remained silent. He simply waited, his senses heightened, his finger tensing on the trigger. He knew this was the culmination, the final confrontation. A battle for redemption, a battle for Caroline, a battle for his future. Blackwood rounded the wagon, his eyes burning with malevolent intent. He raised his revolver, poised to fire. Levi fired first. The projectile slammed into Blackwood's chest, sending him staggering backward. He collapsed to the earth, his eyes wide with stunned disbelief. The last man, witnessing his leader's demise, faltered, then spun and fled, disappearing into the woods. The valley returned to silence, broken only by the faint rustling of leaves in the breeze. Levi stood motionless, his chest heaving, his hand locked on the revolver. He glanced down at Blackwood's still form, a wave of revulsion washing over him. He had taken a life. Again. However, this felt different. This time, he had killed to safeguard, to defend, to rescue the woman he loved. He holstered his revolver and turned toward the barn, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to see Caroline. He had to know she was unharmed. He found her inside, huddled in a corner, her face ashen and streaked with tears. She looked up as he entered, her eyes a mixture of dread and profound relief. "Levi," she whispered, her voice trembling. He knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. "Are you all right?" She nodded, tears coursing down her face. I thought I was going to lose you." He squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You're not going to lose me, Caroline. I promise you. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." He pulled her into his embrace, holding her tight, feeling the comforting warmth of her body against his. He closed his eyes, inhaling the scent of her hair, thankful for her presence, for her love, for the opportunity she had given him to begin again. But he knew this was only the preface. The past had come knocking, and it wouldn't retreat so easily. He had created enemies, dangerous enemies, and they wouldn't relent until they had what they craved. And what they craved was him, or what he once was. He would shield Caroline. He would fight for their shared future. He would do everything within his power to ensure her safety, even if it meant embracing the darkness he had struggled so hard to leave behind. Courage and loyalty. The sharp tang of bird powder filled Caroline's lungs as she watched Levi contend with the last of the gang. Fear, a frigid vise, threatened to immobilize her, but the memory of Blackwood's vacant stare jolted her into motion. One assailant, a gaunt figure sporting a cruel smirk, aimed his revolver at Levi's spine. Reflexively, Caroline snatched up a discarded shotgun, its weight surprisingly comforting in her grip. Blackwood's, undoubtedly. The gaunt man, preoccupied with Levi, remained oblivious to her approach. Fueled by a sudden rush, Caroline brought the shotgun stock down on his wrist. He cried out, the revolver clattering across the hard-packed earth. Before he could recover, she booted the weapon farther away. He lunged, claws extended, but she sidestepped with unexpected grace, sending him sprawling into the muddy street. From shadowed porches and dusty windows, the townspeople watched. Murmurs spread through the observing crowd, a blend of apprehension and morbid fascination. They judged Levi an outsider, a brooding figure taken in by Caroline's compassion. Now they witnessed a different side, a fierce, unleashed power. And Caroline, too, was revealed anew, no longer simply the gentle healer, but a woman forged in fire. Levi, momentarily clear of his attackers, saw Caroline confront the gaunt man. "Caroline, stay back!" he bellowed, voice ragged. But she stood firm. "I'm not abandoning you," she answered, her voice only faintly trembling. "Not now, not ever." The gaunt man, scrambling upright, spat a mouthful of dirt. "You'll regret this, lady," he hissed. He drew a knife from his boot, its edge flashing in the waning sunlight. Before he could strike, a stone zipped past his ear, missing his temple by mere inches. He stumbled, momentarily dazed. Another followed, then another, flung by unseen arms from the periphery. Sheriff Brody stepped forward, his face an etching of disapproval. "Enough!" he roared, though his usual authority seemed diminished. He hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Old Man Hemlock, the town's blacksmith, emerged from his forge, a weighty hammer clutched in his calloused hand. "Are we just going to stand here and let them destroy our town?" he bellowed, his voice resonating with unexpected strength. "Or are we going to stand up for ourselves?" A wave of agreement washed through the onlookers. Hesitation crumbled into a dawning sense of obligation. Some seized whatever implements lay at hand: shovels, pitchforks, even rolling pins. Bolstered by this emergent unity, Caroline advanced on the gaunt man. "Leave my town," she stated, her voice ringing clear, "and tell your cohorts to stay away." The gaunt man, seeing the shift in momentum, wavered. He scanned his fallen companions, then the growing crowd. With a final, venomous glare at Caroline and Levi, he turned and bolted, disappearing down the thoroughfare. Levi, his lungs laboring, watched him retreat. He turned to Caroline, his eyes a confluence of gratitude and worry. "Are you hurt?" he rasped. Caroline nodded, although her knees felt like water. "I'm all right," she replied, forcing a smile. "Just a bit jawed." He reached out, gently tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "You were magnificent," he murmured. "Valiant. Aye. I don't know what I would have done if you'd been hurt." The fight's adrenaline drained away, replaced by a mutual sense of deliverance and a deepening bond. But the lingering fear persisted, a pall hanging over their tentative peace. Sheriff Brody, clearing his throat, approached with caution. Boone, he began, his voice guarded. Or Levi. Whatever you call yourself. We have to talk. Levi tensed, preparing for the coming condemnation. But then, he glimpsed something unexpected in the sheriff's gaze. A flicker of understanding, even a grudging respect. Maybe you ain't so bad after all, Brody conceded, his eyes falling on the corpses of Blackwood and his posse. But you brought trouble to our town, and now we have to figure out how to handle it. Old Man Hemlock advanced, hammer still firm in his grip. He saved our town, he asserted, his voice unwavering. He defended Caroline. That's enough for me. Others echoed his sentiments, their voices a chorus of newfound support. The current had turned. They'd witnessed Levi's fidelity, his bravery in protecting Caroline and their community. They had seen Caroline's resolve, her steadfast devotion to the man she cherished, and in that instant they began to question their ingrained biases, their anxieties, their prejudices. Levi gazed at Caroline, her face pale yet determined. In her eyes, he saw a reflection of the man he aspired to be. A man worthy of her devotion and faith. He knew the path ahead would be fraught with peril, that his past would continue to haunt him. But he also knew he was no longer alone. He had Caroline, and he had the growing support of the town beginning to perceive him not as an outlaw, but as a man striving for pabara, absolution. And that, he understood, was a battle worth fighting. Justice served, the dust cloud still hung in the air like a shroud when the thunder of hooves heralded Sheriff Brody's arrival. His deputies fanned out behind him. They surged into the square, weapons raised. The tableau of defeated outlaws telling its own story. Brody, his face a roadmap of hard-won frontier experience, scanned the scene. His gaze lingered on the sprawled bodies before fixing on Levi, who stood tall despite the grime and sweat clinging to him, Caroline a steadfast presence at his side. What in God's name transpired here? Brody's voice, roughened by years of quelling disturbances, carried a weight suitable for this far more serious matter. Blackwood, still gagging on blood, attempted to rise, only to be pinned by a deputy's heavy boot. He jumped us, Sheriff. That's Boone. He's got a price on his head. Blackwood croaked, eyes skittering around, seeking allies. Brody's gaze sharpened. Boone, you say? He assessed Levi, studying the angles of his face. Levi, ain't it? That's what folks are calling you round here. Levi met the sheriff's scrutiny head on. It is. These men came looking for trouble, Sheriff. They made threats against Caroline, against this town. Caroline stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. They're lying, Sheriff. They were the aggressors. They intended to steal my land and harm anyone who interfered. Brody pivoted towards the townsfolk, now cautiously emerging from their dwellings, their expressions a mix of apprehension and morbid curiosity. Anyone back up this woman's story? A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Silas, the blacksmith, a man not known for confrontation, spoke up hesitantly. It's the truth, Sheriff. I witnessed it. They were the instigators. Old Man Hemlock, rarely seen beyond his porch, shuffled forward, his cane providing shaky support. He shielded my granddaughter Lily. That Boone fella kept her safe when those hoodlums started shooting. One by one, others added their voices to the growing chorus of support for Levi. Even Mrs. Abernathy, famed for her busybody nature and skepticism towards outsiders, chimed in. He didn't have to risk his neck. He could have bolted, but he stood his ground and defended us. The tide had shifted. The fear that had paralyzed the town was giving way to reluctant admiration, a growing understanding that they may have misjudged the newcomer. Brody listened, his face an impassive mask. He knew these people intimately. He understood their biases, their prejudices. Yet, he also possessed the ability to discern truth from falsehood. He saw it reflected in their gazes, detected it in their tones. "All right," he declared, his voice silencing the muttering. "Deputies, place these men under arrest. Blackwood, you and your cronies are charged with assault, attempted robbery, and disturbing the peace." As the deputies manhandled Blackwood and his remaining accomplices, fastening them with iron bracelets, Brody turned his attention back to Levi. "Levi, I'm going to need you to accompany me to the station for a formal statement." "Understood, Sheriff," Levi responded evenly. At the station, Levi recounted the day's events, his narration precise and devoid of embellishment. Caroline remained at his side, her presence a silent source of strength. Brody listened with unwavering focus, pausing occasionally to pose clarifying questions. After what seemed an age, Brody leaned back in his chair, a sigh escaping his lips. "Levi, I've heard ample testimony. Based on the accounts of the townsfolk, coupled with your own version of events, I find no justification to detain you. You acted in self-defense and in the protection of others." A wave of relief surged through Levi, tinged with a persistent unease. He was absolved, but the specter of his former life still cast a long shadow. "Thank you, Sheriff." "Don't thank me, Levi," Brody said, his tone softening slightly. "Thank these folks. They vouched for you. They saw the man you are today, not the man you might have been in the past." As Levi and Caroline exited the sheriff's office, the setting sun cast elongated shadows across the thoroughfare. The townspeople had coalesced into small gatherings, engaged in hushed conversations. Upon spotting Levi's approach, they fell silent, their eyes drawn to him. Levi halted, uncertain of what to say. "Words escape me," he began, his voice roughened by emotion. "Thank you, to each and every one of you, for putting your faith in me." A few nods of acknowledgement were exchanged, but the silence persisted, heavy with unexpressed sentiments. Then Silas, the blacksmith, stepped forward. "You're one of us now, Levi," he stated, his voice gruff yet earnest. "You proved that beyond any doubt today." A murmur of assent rippled through the crowd, and the tension in the air dissipated. Levi felt a burden lift from his shoulders, a sensation of belonging he had never experienced before. Caroline squeezed his hand reassuringly, her eyes reflecting pride. "See? I assured you they'd come around." Levi smiled, a genuine smile that illuminated his eyes. He surveyed the faces of the townspeople, faces that had once betrayed suspicion and mistrust, now expressing a measure of acceptance. He still had a journey ahead of him, he knew, but he had embarked on the initial stage. As they meandered back towards Caroline's farm, Levi found his thoughts drawn to his past. The name Boone still resonated within him, a haunting echo of the man he once was. But he was no longer that individual. He was Levi, a man who had found love, a man who had discovered a place to call home, a man prepared to defend both. And with Caroline at his side, he felt capable of confronting whatever challenges lay ahead, even if those challenges involved confronting the ghosts of his past. The road to redemption was arduous, but he was determined to traverse it, step by step. The sun descended below the horizon, painting the sky with fiery hues of orange and violet, a promise of renewal, a fresh start. And as Levi gazed at Caroline, her face illuminated by the warm radiance of the sunset, he knew that with her love as his compass, he could surmount any obstacle. A new horizon sunlight, brushed with apricot and gold, dusted Caroline's features in slumber. Levi observed her, a familiar tenderness blossoming in his chest, both a timeless echo and a novel sensation. He delicately traced her jawline with a roughened fingertip, admiring the resilient spirit and inherent goodness etched there. He'd confronted Blackwood, plumbed the depths of his tormented history, yet this quiet, reverent appraisal of Caroline unsettled him more profoundly. He rose, the floorboards cool against his skin. The rich fragrance of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the kitchen, a daily ritual Caroline maintained, even after nights marred by trauma. He discovered her at the stove, back turned, her movements fluid and self-assured. "Morning," he rumbled, his voice thick with sleep. She pivoted, her answering smile a sunrise that banished lingering shadows. "Morning, Levi. Rest well?" He paused. Did he ever truly find solace in sleep anymore? The nightmares had ebbed, but fragmented memories persisted. Splinters of a past he couldn't fully reconcile, a past that threatened to consume the serenity he'd discovered. "Adequately," he responded, skirting the complete truth. They settled at the kitchen table, a comfortable quiet settling between them, broken only by the gentle clinking of their mugs. At last, Levi broached the subject. "Caroline, there's something we need to discuss." Her brow knit slightly, a fleeting shadow of worry crossing her expression. "About what?" He inhaled deeply, the aroma of coffee offering scant comfort against the unease within. "About us, about this place, about Boone." He glimpsed a flicker of pain in her eyes, swiftly masked by steely resolve. "Levi, you are not Boone. You've proven that beyond doubt. You defended this town, defended me." "I know," he acknowledged, reaching to clasp her hand across the table. Her skin was warm, grounding, a vital anchor in his swirling uncertainty. "But Blackwood may be gone, but the whispers remain. Each time someone looks at me, they'll see a specter, and I'll see it too. I can feel him, Caroline, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness." She squeezed his hand firmly. "So, what are you proposing?" He glanced around the welcoming kitchen, at the ranch she had so tirelessly protected, the haven that had become his refuge. "I'm suggesting we leave." Silence descended, thick and weighty. He watched as a spectrum of emotions flickered across her face. Surprise, sadness, and ultimately understanding. "Leave?" she echoed softly. "Begin anew." He pressed, his voice gaining strength. "Somewhere untouched by the past. A place where I can simply be Levi, not merely Boone's ghost." Caroline gazed out the window, at the undulating hills, the grazing cattle, the land intimately woven into the fabric of her being. "This is my home, Levi, my family's legacy." "I understand," he said gently. "I wouldn't even suggest it unless I truly felt it was the right path for us. For you, to escape the lingering taint. For me, to finally lay Boone to rest." She remained quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Then, she looked back at him, her eyes reflecting quiet determination. "Where would we go?" "I'm not sure," he confessed. "West, perhaps. California. A place where the sun shines with greater intensity, where the past doesn't loom so large." A subtle smile graced her lips. "California, huh? I've always wanted to see the ocean." He grinned, a wave of relief washing over him. "Then it's decided?" She nodded, her grip on his hand tightening. "It's decided. We sell the ranch, pack our belongings, and journey west." The decision made, a sense of purpose electrified the atmosphere. They spent the following days readying the ranch for sale, a poignant undertaking laden with memories, both bitter and sweet. Caroline managed the complex transactions, her shrewd mind and unwavering resolve proving invaluable. Levi assisted where he could, repairing fences, reinforcing the barn, each task a tacit farewell to the life he was relinquishing. The weight of their decision pressed down most acutely as the day approached to finalize the sale. They rode to their favorite vista, a clearing overlooking the valley, as the setting sun splashed the sky with hues of fire and amethyst. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Caroline murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Levi encircled her with his arm, drawing her closer. "It is, but we'll discover beauty wherever we go, so long as we have each other." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I'm afraid, Levi." "I know," he responded, holding her tighter. "But we'll confront it together. We always have." They watched the sun descend, darkness slowly engulfing the valley floor. As the first stars began to punctuate the night sky, Levi turned to her, his eyes reflecting a love that transcended the past, a love that held the promise of a brighter future. "I love you, Caroline," he breathed, his voice raw with emotion. "I love you too, Levi," she replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. He framed her face with his hands, gently brushing away the tears with his thumbs. He lowered his head and kissed her, a kiss that was both a valediction and a pledge, a kiss that cemented their bond and reaffirmed their commitment. It was a kiss that spoke of shared trials, unwavering devotion, and a future built upon hope and affection. It was a kiss that tasted of liberation, of possibility, of a vast horizon awaiting discovery. Leaving the past behind, dusty sunbeams lanced through the barn's aged planks, a spectral dance Levi disturbed with each movement. He tugged his bandana higher, a futile gesture against the gritty air as he inventoried his remaining tools, discerning what to liquidate, what to retain. Caroline had journeyed into town to ratify the ranch's sale, a transaction that settled on him with the weight of finality, a mingling of rue and anticipation. He was relinquishing a history etched in this land, yet simultaneously hurtling toward an unwritten future, one he dared to envision as brighter, cleaner. Reaching into a shadowy recess, his fingers encountered something frigid and hard beneath a mound of discarded burlap. He retrieved it, a petite wooden box, its surface alive with exquisitely carved wolves baying at a crimson moon. Unfamiliar, not acquired during his tenure here. A shiver of disquiet traced his spine. This predated his arrival. He raised the lid. Reclining on faded velvet was a solitary, time-worn silver dollar, its eagle effaced almost beyond recognition. He lifted it, the metal felt strangely substantial, almost burdensome in his palm. A fragmented vision assaulted him. A smoky gambling den, a tense poker game, the flash of a blade, a body slumping. The image vanished as swiftly as it surfaced, leaving him breathless and reeling. He examined the coin. He knew, instinctively, it was more than mere currency. It was a relic, a souvenir from that eclipsed period of his life, that existence whispered to be steeped in brutality and darkness. A fragment of Boone. Leaving the barn, he headed toward the river, the silver dollar still captive in his grip. The water surged onward with unwavering momentum, a perpetual reminder of time's relentless march and the impossibility of true reversion. He settled on the embankment, the tall grasses whispering secrets in the breeze. Again, he studied the coin, turning it, weighing it. He could keep it, of course. Cling to this fragment of his past, attempt to decode its secrets, unravel its mysteries. But to what end? It would only serve as a constant spectre of the man he once was, a man he vehemently rejected. He reflected upon Caroline, her steadfast conviction in his inherent goodness, her transformative love that had hauled him back from the precipice. He conjured the future they were forging together, a future purged of the shadows that haunted him. A final glance, a silent valediction to his former self. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he cast it away. The silver dollar pirouetted in the air, catching a final glimmer of sunlight before plunging into the river's opaque depths. He watched as the ripples unfurled, gradually dissolving until the surface mirrored the undisturbed sky. A tide of release swept over him, a levity he hadn't experienced in what felt like eons. He had relinquished it, severed the last tangible tether to that previous incarnation. He was unburdened. Caroline discovered him by the river, her brow furrowed with worry. "Levi, are you all right? I saw you bolt from the barn." He rose, brushing away clinging bits of earth. "I'm fine," he asserted, his voice firm and resolute. "Just tying up loose ends." She approached, her gaze probing his. "The ranch is sold," she revealed softly. "We depart in the morning." He captured her hand, their fingers entwining. "Then let's go," he urged, his eyes locking with hers. "Let's leave the past interred." Later that night, as they lay entwined, the quiet was pierced solely by the soft susurrus of the hearth fire. Caroline nestled closer, her body radiating warmth. "Are you certain about this, Levi?" she whispered. "About leaving?" He tightened his embrace. "I'm certain," he avowed. "It's the right course, for both of us." "I simply desire your happiness," she said. "And I don't wish you were fleeing anything." "I'm not fleeing," he clarified. "I'm progressing towards you, towards our shared future." He kissed her temple, and she exhaled contentedly. "I love you, Levi," she confessed. "I love you too, Caroline," he returned, more profoundly than words could articulate. The following dawn emerged pristine and vivid, the heavens of boundless azure. They loaded their scant belongings onto the wagon, the horses eager to commence their trek. As they steered out of the driveway, Levi cast a final backward look at the ranch. A beautiful place, where he had uncovered love and serenity, yet also a place plagued by the specters of his previous life. He redirected his gaze forward, toward the beckoning horizon. California called. A fresh commencement, a prospect to ultimately embody the man he aspired to be, the man Caroline so fervently believed he could be. As the wagon wheels spun, carrying them farther afield, Levi sensed a bud of hope unfurling in his soul. The past remained behind. The future unfurled ahead. And he had Caroline at his side. That was all that mattered. They journeyed in quietude for some time. The soul sounds the steady cadence of the horse's hooves and the groaning of the wagon's joints. Eventually, Caroline broke the silence. "What do you suppose it will hold?" she queried, her voice tinged with anticipation. "California, I mean." Levi smiled gently. "I can't say," he replied. "But I know we'll confront it together, whatever may lie ahead." He reached over and squeezed her hand reassuringly. "And that is everything." As the sun began its descent, daubing the sky with flamboyant brushstrokes of coral and amethyst, they pressed forward, forsaking the past and venturing toward a future imbued with promise, affection, and the dawn of a cry. New chapter. Undoubtedly, the road ahead would be extensive and arduous, but united, they were certain they could weather any storm. They left the past behind, but they carried their love with them. And that was the most priceless treasure of all. Sunrise on a new beginning gravel skittered and popped beneath the wagon wheels, a stark punctuation to the valley's profound quiet. Dawn spilled like liquid gold over the jagged mountain peaks, igniting the landscape with rosa-tinted light. Levi halted the team, the leather reins a familiar, yet oddly unfamiliar weight in his palms. Caroline, perched beside him, drew a deep breath, a delicate smile playing on her lips. "It's breathtaking, isn't it?" she murmured, her gaze sweeping across the vast expanse. He nodded, his own eyes mirroring her awe. More than beauty, it offered serenity, a haven where they could finally lay the foundation for a life that mattered. The air, crisp and clean, carried the fragrance of pine and rich earth, a world away from the gritty existence he was so eager to shed. "It is," he rasped, emotion thick in his throat. "Home." The property was rough around the edges. A ramshackle cabin marked the spot for their future dwelling, encompassed by overgrown fields begging for attention. A dilapidated barn leaned with a weary sigh, a monument to years of abandonment. Yet Levi envisioned potential, a blank slate etched with their aspirations. He jumped down, offering Caroline a hand. Her fingers laced through his, her touch a grounding force. "Ready to make some magic, Mr. Boone?" she teased, a playful spark in her eyes. He grinned, her use of the name sending a pleasant shiver down his spine. "Always, Miss Rivers." The subsequent weeks became a blur of tireless effort. They wrestled the land back to life, mended the barn's broken bones, and broke ground for their new home. Levi pushed himself relentlessly, muscles screaming, hands roughened and raw. He welcomed the pain. Each strike of the axe, each stone laid, was a stride further from the specter of his past and closer to the man he yearned to become. Caroline, a beacon of unwavering optimism, proved an inexhaustible partner. She coaxed life from the soil, sowed seeds of hope, and conjured meals that nourished both body and spirit. One afternoon, as they wrestled heavy timbers for the frame, Levi stopped, wiping sweat from his forehead. Caroline's brow furrowed. "Something troubling you?" she asked, concern coloring her voice. He hesitated. "Just a thought." He struggled to articulate the unease gnawing at him. "I keep expecting disaster, like our past will inevitably find us." Caroline placed a reassuring hand on his forearm, her touch a solid anchor. "It won't," she declared, her eyes holding unwavering conviction. "We won't allow it. This is our sanctuary, Levi, our life to shape. We craft our destiny." He peered into her eyes, searching for a flicker of doubt, discovering only strength. He inhaled deeply, letting her words take root. "You're right," he affirmed, a newfound steel entering his tone. "We do." As the days bled into weeks, the house blossomed into form. Walls ascended, the roof was secured, and soon a sturdy structure stood as a testament to their devotion. A broad porch, facing west, invited them to witness nature's nightly spectacle. Inside, Caroline's flair transformed bare rooms into a cozy refuge. She hung gossamer curtains, scattered vibrant rugs, and peppered the space with personal accents that declared it a home. One twilight, perched on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of vibrant fire, Levi was engulfed by a sense of tranquility he'd never known. Caroline nestled against him, her head resting on his shoulder. The air hung still, carrying the evening chorus of crickets and the distant serenade of a coyote. "It's perfect," she breathed, her voice a mere whisper. He tightened his arm around her, drawing her closer. "It is," he agreed, his gaze lost in the breathtaking panorama. "And it will only be more so when we fill it with a family." Caroline looked up, her eyes glittering in the fading glow. A radiant smile blossomed on her face. "You truly desire that, don't you?" His heart swelled within his chest, and he nodded. "More than anything, to build a life with you, to raise our children in this valley, it's everything I've ever wanted. Or at least, everything he could now recall wanting." The image of a child, a son or daughter frolicking through these fields, flooded him with a joy he couldn't articulate. "Then we shall make it a reality," Caroline vowed, her voice brimming with resolve. "We'll forge a family, a life, a future, right here in this valley." Levi kissed her forehead, his heart overflowing with affection. He understood that challenges lay ahead, but the shadows of the past might still lengthen. But he also knew that with Caroline by his side, he could weather any storm. He had discovered solace in her love, a new identity in her unwavering faith in him. No longer the fugitive Boone, haunted by violence, but Levi, a man given a second chance, resolute to make the most of it. Later that night, bathed in the soft moonlight streaming through the window, Levi traced the delicate curve of Caroline's cheek. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For what, my love?" she asked, her eyelids fluttering open. "For everything," he murmured. "For believing in me, for giving me sanctuary, for loving me as I am." She smiled gently, her fingers twining with his. "No gratitude is needed, Levi. You are worthy of it all." He drew her close, burying his face in her hair. "I love you, Caroline," he whispered, his voice overflowing with tenderness. "I love you too, Levi," she responded, her voice a soothing balm. As they drifted into sleep, intertwined in each other's embrace, Levi understood he'd finally found his place in the tapestry of existence. He had been gifted love, serenity, and a future worth defending. The past might still linger in the shadows, but it no longer dictated his path. He was Levi Boone, and he was prepared to face whatever lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that Caroline was his unwavering companion. Their dawn was just beginning to break.